Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Clean Libertarian Podcast, and thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to be real honest. I was not intending on doing an episode this week. Just been feeling real heavy, real squirrely, kind of out of it, and so I was going to take this time, and I still am, to focus on some self-care and focus on, just me and the family and all of that. But I couldn't quite figure out, what the hell's going on. And then it dawned on me that my damn clean date was coming up. And I'm grateful for my clean date, even though I just said, damn clean date. I'm just saying, that's what it is. Among a lot of addicts who are, doing this recovery thing, when we get close to our clean date, I don't know what it is, man. It's just something in us kind of gets us in a weird spot. And so I figured, you know what? I'm going to go back and download. I'm going to just re-upload my story. This was like the 6th or 7th episode that I ever did with the podcast. Audio quality is not as good as it is today. So, hope you can hear it and get something out of it. But I figured, what better thing to throw up on the week of my clean date? Coming up on 2 years clean. At the time of recording this, it's Friday. I'll release this on Sunday, so I will have 2 years clean then. And here's the thing, guys, is that, I've talked about it before. Those of you who've been following along already know, at one point in time, I did have 7.5 years clean, and I had a very public, very bad relapse that kept me out for about 4 months. And so I'm 2 years back and still working on getting my foot off my neck and feeling embarrassed and ashamed for not having more time than I actually do. But, here's the thing. I don't put that standard on anybody else, so I got to learn how to be cooler to me, cooler to myself. And I think that I have a great story. And so for those of y'all who maybe haven't heard it yet, here it is.
All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Clean Libertarian Podcast. And today I thought that we could just kind of go over some of the things that brought me into recovery, kind of give you an update on kind of where it all started, how I got to where I am now, and so on and so forth. And this is kind of something that I've wanted to do for a while, at least have it on the books, so if anybody was ever wondering, hey, is there help for somebody like me? Maybe you can find some identification in my story to some degree. So with that being said, we'll just take it all the way back, man. So I was born and I'm confident that I was the most awkward person to ever be brought into this world. Like, my entire upbringing could be just called social blunders. I just never could quite fit in where I stood. My mom was pretty popular in school. My dad, same situation. He was a football jock, and so whenever they found out they were pregnant and it was going to be a boy, I'm sure they had all sorts of dreams and hopes, and as parents tend to do. But about their son being a football or a sports guy or having lots of friends and this and that. And as time went along, they started to see that likely wasn't going to happen. See, I just didn't get into sports. I couldn't stand them. I tried out soccer. Being a fat kid on a soccer field is not a good time. So I more or less just kind of sat on the bench. And funny story is the coach used to bring these little orange slices for the whole team, right? And so I'm doing my usual. I'm sitting on the bench, enjoying watching everybody else play the game. And I'm just hammering these orange slices, right? And there's a comical pile of orange rinds just collecting at my feet, and the coach came over and grabbed the bowl and was like, hey, let's lay off those. We need to save some for everybody else. And yeah, that sucked. That was not a good time. I think I told my mom soccer wasn't going to work out right after that. So I was out on soccer. Football was the same thing, man. I just didn't like running around a whole lot. I had a lot more fun sitting down and playing video games and just kind of being isolated. Like, that was my spot. That's where I felt the most comfortable. So, knowing that I was good at video games, at the time it was like Sega Genesis and Nintendo 64 that was out. And so, like, I tried to reach out to other people in my class who were, into similar things. And without the ability to be social, that doesn't really work out so much. So I couldn't even fit in with the video game nerds. There was one thing that I thought was going to be my avenue into the social sphere, if you will. And that was my undying love for Star Wars. Now, like, back then, Star Wars wasn't, geek chic wasn't a thing, right? You were a nerd. It is what it is, but it's still, man, that was a part of me, man. I love Star Wars even to this day. And there's a store that's not around anymore called Hastings. And they sold like books, CDs, games, stuff like that. Well, when The Phantom Menace came out, they said, they sent these flyers out in the local paper that said, dress up as your favorite Star Wars character and come up here on this night. And we're going to be having all sorts of other people who are dressing up, and then they're going to come and be a part of, and, it's going to be a fun night, and they're giving away free shit at the door, like door prizes. So in my head, I'm like, man, this is it. This is my calling. This is where I'm going to finally cut my teeth into the social sphere. And so I told my mom, I said, hey, Mom, will you buy me a Jedi outfit? And she said no. And I was like, well, fuck. So I went up to my bedroom and I looked around, and I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about or not, but during Christmas time, the cheap colognes, it's always sold in like a box set with some goofy shit on the side. Like, you got the cologne, maybe some, I don't know, lotion of some sort. And then in this particular set that I had gotten, it was a bathrobe with the shitty cologne label stitched right on the right breast area, so just very visible. So I put on this damn bathrobe, right? And I go get a coat hanger. I straighten the coat hanger out, get some cardboard, super glue the cardboard to the coat hanger, and then paint the cardboard blue. And so, like, here I am looking like the most ghetto Luke Skywalker you've ever seen. And I go to my mom and I'm like, Mom, take me to Hastings. My friends are waiting. Right? So, like, I'm jazzed up, man. I'm ready to go. So she takes me up there, drops me off, says she'll be back in a little bit. I'm like, cool. So I walk in this store and I'm expecting to see like all sorts of people, and I'm the only fucking person dressed up. Like, nothing but eyes staring at me like, what the fuck is this kid doing? And I was like, what the hell? I thought you guys were having a event. They're like, oh yeah, we are, but just nobody's really showing up. So, hey, you at least win the door prize. And I'm like, okay, what is it? And they gave me a 10% off coupon. I was fucking pissed, man. Like, this was going to be the most epic night of my life. And it was cut short because Hastings sucks. And guess what? They're no longer around. They filed bankruptcy. So suck it, bitches. Like, I'm still here. Karma's a thing. But that's just a million and one stories like that, guys. And so my parents see their kid, and their kid isn't acting well, and this is right at the height of all the Johnny B. Good meds, right? So like the Adderall, Vyvanse, Ritalin, shit like that. And so they start sending me to these doctors, and these doctors are putting me in all these pills, and nothing's really working that great effectively until they put me on this one, and it's called Dexedrine. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that or not, but it is insanely close to methamphetamines, like the actual real deal. And man, I remember taking this pill and feeling like finally, this is who I'm supposed to be. Like, I have found the key to happiness for me. Like, I never felt comfortable in my own skin, but now I've learned that there is an external source that I can use to fix an internal problem. And it was just like a really good thing. And I, for a while, was doing better in school. I wasn't like getting shitty reports from the teachers. I wasn't getting in trouble. I could finally talk to girls. Like, Jesus, man, I'd never been able to do that. Now, granted, they didn't give a damn what I was talking about, but I still had the confidence to kind of, shoot my shot. And it was just like, I'd unlocked something. But and this is true for anything I did past this, but it doesn't matter how effective something is like that. Eventually, I will find a way to ruin it. And by ruin it, I mean like overdo it. Moderation just has never been in my vocabulary. And before I know it, like, I'm taking an extra pill and I'm staying up all night and I'm doing this shit. Like, okay, Dad smoked Marlboro Light 100s in a box, right? And so he always bought the cartons from the store. And we lived in a 2-story house. And so I would be all jacked up on these pills and shit. And I wanted those cigarettes, man. And I knew Dad went and got a new carton. So what I would do is wait until I knew for sure everybody in the house was asleep. And then I start doing this like ninja routine down the stairs. And I'm skipping steps that I knew creaked and, being very, very careful about it. And I go down there and I had this little X-Acto knife, and I would very casually, in between where the 2 flaps are glued together at the end of the carton, I'd cut in between there and get a pack out and then glue the carton back together and put it back. And Dad would wake up in the morning, maybe it would be the next day, it might be a couple days after that, but he would always know, right? And he would always know, and he'd call me on it, and I'm like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. So therein was a huge fight. He knew his weird ass kid is like doing weird shit with cigarettes, like sneaking downstairs and getting them somehow. And so it was just constant fighting. And, by the time I was 18, I'd already been kicked out of school a million times. Just didn't ever really get it, man. Never got the social thing. Nothing. And so when I was 18, parents are like, you need to go, man. And so I left the house, and I was like, yeah, fuck y'all. Like, I can do this. No big deal. At least I'll be able to have fun, do whatever I want to do. But when I left the house, I didn't consider the fact that I wasn't going to take my prescriptions with me, right? Because you need insurance and money. So it was just like, find a place to live, find a job to kind of like support some of my habits, and just dive off into the deep end, man. Let's see what's going on. I'll tell you right now that, the DARE program was one of those things that when they came into the school and they'd be talking about like, they'd be putting weed on the same pedestal or the same level as like heroin, right? They'd be saying like, pot is just dangerous. It's extremely dangerous and habit forming and yada, yada, yada. Well, when I tried pot for the first time and I found out, oh, it's not that bad, like I felt paranoid as fuck and, wanted to eat everything in the house. But beyond that, I wasn't like crazy addicted. So like my mentality going forward from there was, you know what? They lied about this. They probably lied about everything. And so that's kind of the mentality I had, man. There was nothing that I was going to be afraid to try. And for the remainder of my youth, I did exactly that, man. I tried everything I could get my hands on. There's not really anything out there that I haven't gotten loaded on. Some things DARE actually had pretty close to the fucking right, and other things they had it pretty far gone. And it just turned into this thing, man, where I lived in this house or this studio apartment with like 15 other people. It was like a punk house, man. We all of us were just a bunch of little thug assholes, but we had a great time. And we would essentially all go out during the day, work our various jobs or hustles or whatever, and cop whatever we could cop, and then just all came back together at night, and we just throw everything on the table and just have a party every single night. And that was fun, you know? I mean, especially that was, for me at the time, it was a lot of fun. But somehow during all of that and moving forward, I don't know when, but it stopped being fun and it started being a chore. Like the idea of not getting fucked up was just not something that I had on my radar at all. I couldn't conceive of a life where I wasn't fixing this thing that I had wrong inside of me with an outside, substance of some sort. And, I think that's the story for everybody who's ever found their way into trying to get out of addiction, is that it didn't start out bad. Because I guess if it did, we would never find ourselves, at the level that we got to. From there, moving on, just a lot, a downward spiral, right? Like I'm doing more drugs and getting in trouble and running from the cops and just doing crazy shit. And then eventually, I have my daughter. Okay. There were several women that I got to sleep with me, and it was a mutual understanding that our relationship only existed as far as this dope sack went, right? So as soon as the dope sack was gone, it was time for you to go, and it was time for me to go, and this and that. Well, one of these women came along, and I just really got along with her. It seemed like we were doing okay there for a little bit until we weren't. And somewhere in the middle of it, she got pregnant. And I'll never forget the day my daughter was born. I was young. I was 20 years old. And I was 21 years old. And I remember the night that my kid's mom went into labor. I had done a shot of heroin. I was drunk, and here I am trying to drive her to the hospital. It was all bad, but we did get there in one piece. And so I'm in this like stupor, like this haze. And when in that room, my kid's mom's going into labor, here my daughter is born, and it's just like instant sobering moment. Like instantly, I wasn't fucked up at all, and I had perfect clarity. And I remember looking into this kid's eyes, and everything that I had tried to do up to that point always ended in spectacular failure. Like no matter what my intentions were, I would always set out to do the very best that I could. And I looked at this little girl, and in my mind, I thought, you know what? Everything that I had in me that had the capacity to be good has been passed on to this little girl, right? The sky is the limit. She's going to go out there and she's going to kill it. And I kind of had it resigned in my head. I was like, you know what? If I ever had a reason to get and stay clean, here it is right now. I'm done, right? Like I'm walking away from the life. I'm walking away from getting high, and I'm gonna fly straight for once. And I think I maintained that for a couple of months, outside of that. And then before long, right after her 1-year birthday, as a matter of fact, we're in a dope house, and I'm like, what the hell's going on here, man? What's happened? And in walks my little girl in the bedroom, and she's holding one of my needles in her hand. And that was a fucked up moment, man. Here was this perfect, beautiful, awesome little girl holding the very thing that I just could not bring myself to let go. And it was like a crossroads for me, you know. There's no denying what that meant or what that was standing in front of me. There was no covering up or hiding it. And I think it was like 2 days after that where my mom showed up and she had paperwork from a judge. See, because we stopped answering phone calls from the family who were wanting to see their granddaughter. We stopped answering phone calls. We stopped communicating. And so they knew what was going on. They knew that there probably wasn't a good living situation for my kid at the time. And so mom went to the courthouse and got some paperwork, you know, for emergency guardianship. And they granted it to her. And she showed up and said, "Hey, I'm taking my granddaughter with me today." And I had ran this situation through in my head over and over again. I always knew that this day was going to come. But, and I knew in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to fight her on it. Nobody's taking my kid. Nobody. But having seen what I saw just a couple of nights before that, man, there was no more fight left in me. I knew I was fucking up. And, so I said, "Okay, you know, here you go." She said, "You know, I can't stop you from ruining your life, but I can stop you from ruining hers. Get your shit together." And off they went. And I went back into the dope house, and everybody around me was telling me stuff like, "You know, you're an idiot. People like us, we don't get clean. There is no way out. Like, you lost your daughter forever." You know, and I believed them. I really did, man. I thought that I'd screwed up because I didn't know that people like me got clean. Excuse me. And I kind of just fell deeper into that hole. And there was a lot of different things that occurred during this time. I went to detox a few times. I tried a few rehabs. And every time I went, I would always have these little seeds that were planted, right? One of them was that, okay, so if you go to a detox facility, what happens is they bring in these, they call them panels. And for 12-step recovery groups, people will go to detox facilities and rehabs and bring in a meeting where they sit down and, very much like I'm doing right now, they share their own story. And you know, these people are walking in the door and I'm judging them before they even have a chance to open their mouths. I'm judging them on their skin tone, on their gender, on what clothes they wear. And, you know, that's it. I'm completely resigned to the fact that they can't tell me shit about where I've been and what I've done. And they, one by one, would start telling their own personal story. And they would talk about the obsession to use. They would talk about wanting to stop and not being able to. They would even say some funny shit like they were the type of addict who would steal your dope and help you try to find it. And I would laugh. I'd be like, fuck, I was that guy. Like, I get that, right? So I'm nodding my head at these parts. Like, that's called identification. I'm identifying with these parts of their story. And then they would move on to something that I had no idea about. And that's finding a life worth living without having to use drugs to do it. And it blew my mind. I'm like, there's no fucking way. Like, it's not possible. Like, I had some really, really great times on dope. Granted, it's been a long time since I've experienced that, but I'm still trying to find it. You know, like, how is it possible to find happiness without doing that? Like I said, I went to detox multiple times, so I'm a hard-headed person, man. Like, I'm going to try every single way besides the way you tell me to try, right? I'm not good with authority. I'm not being good with being told what to do. Very stubborn, but needless to say, those seeds were planted. And so when the day came that it was time for me to start getting my shit together, I knew where to go. And so I did that, man. There was a day that my dope dealer kicked me out of her house and said I needed to go to detox. And that was a bad fucking day. That was a really bad day for me. When your dope dealer's telling you to get clean, you got a fucking problem, man. They wouldn't take my money. And so I'm in this particularly populated area, and I'm walking around. I'm homeless. I have nowhere to go. And it was a weekday and during the morning commute. And here I am walking along, and I'm looking at these people in their cars, and I'm seeing them in their work clothes, and I'm seeing them with their kids in the back seat, taking them to school, and I'm looking at all of these people, and I'm seeing something that I don't have, and that's purpose, right? Like, all these people have a reason to be out and about in the world, and I don't know where I got it in my head, but I was like, they were born with something that I wasn't. That's what it is. Fuck this. Like, fuck all of this. I'm done. And went off, and that night did some really dumb shit. And I was intending on ending it, to some degree. And just the way the night went, it just got into a chase from these people, and, ended up running on foot for like several miles, and then finally got to a spot, and I'm like, I don't want to fucking do this anymore, man. I simply just didn't want to do it. And so I had one of those government cell phones that you see, people hand those out at the little corner store or whatever. They got a little tent set up. Well, I got my hands on one of those, and from one of my stints in detox, I had a phone number saved, and I gave this number a call. And I said, hey, I'm such and such. I need some help, man. And so they said, cool, be at this address. And we're going out of town. They said they're moving down to Altus, Oklahoma, which is like middle of fucking nowhere. I'd never been there. And I'm living in the metro of Oklahoma City. I was like, okay, cool. Maybe that'll be a good idea for me, get out of town for a while. And so there off I went, man. These people picked me up, gave me somewhere warm to sleep for the night, gave me some food, and then drove me down to Altus. And the guy was like, listen, if you really want to get clean and you want to stop fucking around, I'll let you stay on the couch here until you can figure out what your next move is. And that's exactly what I did. And he told me one thing that to this day sticks out in my mind more than anything else. And he said, you know what? You're going to be okay. Now, I'm not one to just blindly believe people. Like, I am very much so a skeptic. And at this point in my life, like, nothing else could go wrong. I could imagine, like, everything had just turned to shit in my life. But I believed him when he said that. I really did. I thought, maybe he's right. Maybe it will be all right, if I just stop getting loaded. And so what happened is that he started spoon feeding me the very basic concepts of what it means to get clean. Now, for those of you listening who've never struggled with addiction, who've never battled it, on a first-hand basis, I'm sure that you can't quite understand what it means whenever I say, like, I didn't know a way out. Because for many people, they think, well, just stop getting high. And for an addict, it's like telling an addict to just stop using drugs is the same thing as telling a homeless person, just go buy a house. Like, there's so much more that's involved in that for us. And I don't know why that is, but it's the case, man. Like, we have lived on the streets for so long and developed these certain defects of character and survival skills that made it possible for us to continue living the lives that we were living. So we had basically, like, become so accustomed to this fucked up lifestyle that we didn't know how to live like normal people anymore. And I had to be retaught that. I mean, shit, I had to be taught, look, you got to wash your clothes on a regular basis. I had to be taught, look, you got to brush your teeth and practice good hygiene. Shit, I had to be taught how to pay my bills on time, man. And so all of these very basic things that you would think that like, oh, I learned that at a young age. Well, I had to relearn that shit later on in life. And the kicker for me was, like I said before, I don't like being told what to do. But being in the spot that I was in, I didn't really have a whole lot of choices that I could see. So I continued to do what I was told and try some of these things out. And little by little, like, I'm noticing my life getting better. I'm noticing that, like, I got some money in my pocket. I noticed that, like, I'm kind of like starting to feel like I got some room to work with here, man. Like, the whole world isn't so on my shoulders. And I'd been down there, you know, like I said, and out this and talking to this guy for about a month. And he says, so what's your legal situation like? And I'm like, well, what the fuck do you mean? You know, I took it offensively. Like, dude, why are you trying to find out about this? Who the hell am I being detained? Yeah, right. So he said, well, listen, you know, what we're learning to do is how to work an honest program and to live an honest life. And if you have some legal stuff, I need to know about that so that way we can work on a solution to that. And so I told him that there was a couple of warrants for me, but, you know, they were just arraignment warrants. I wasn't really sweating it. And he's like, well, what are you going to do about that? And I'm like, well, shit, man. You know, court clerks change all the time. Like, there's election years. Like, surely they'll forget about me and lose my file. Like, I was so far gone that I actually believed that. And he just kind of laughed and said, man, that's not going to work. He's like, that's not going to work at all, bud. We got to figure out what to do here. And so I said, okay. And he said he was going to call his lawyer buddy and get back to me. And so he called his lawyer buddy, calls me back and says, hey, man, so you're going to need to go back to Oklahoma City and kind of confront these charges. And I said, okay, well, am I going to go to jail? He's like, yes, you're going to go to jail. He's like, you've been on the run for a while. You've missed God knows how many court dates. Like, you're going to go to jail. And, you know, in my mind, that's like the fight or flight response starts to kick in, man. I'm like, okay, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I don't have a car. What the fuck are my options here? And then I did something that I hadn't done before. And I started thinking about the long game. I'm like, okay, well, let's say I run and I run away and I stop running from the cops, or I stop listening to these people and I just go try to make it on my own. What am I going to do on down the line when I get busted, you know? And then I'm getting transferred to all sorts of different counties and getting cases figured out, you know, as they come along, sit out one sentence and then have to do another. And I was just like, I don't want that anymore, man. So I told the guy, all right, let's go. And I went to Oklahoma City and I went straight to jail. And I was clean at the time. Now that's a huge thing, right? Because up before this point, I had never been able to do that before. I've always gone to jail fucked up. And the benefit of that is that you can usually sleep for about a week once you get there because you've been running for so hard for so long. But being clean going to jail sucked so bad, man. But I voluntarily went. This was a change, man. I was starting to change. And I went up before the judge. This was my second felony in a year. And I'm thinking I'm going to go to prison. Judge was lenient for whatever fucking reason. The DA and the public defender just were friends, I guess. It's just a crazy story. But more or less, man, I got off with a light probation. And I am firmly convinced it's because I started doing the right thing. I'm firmly convinced it's because I got involved with a group of people who have been down the same road that I'd been and could show me a better life. And moving on from there, I just continued pursuing that. I pursued going to meetings. I pursued working the 12 steps of recovery. I pursued being actively involved with my sponsor and continuously looking at what parts of my life I wanted to correct and fix. And from there, I went from being homeless, right, all the way to owning my own house in about 5 years. I cleaned my credit up completely, bought my own house on my own, didn't need a handout from anybody, never been to college. So, I mean, like, I fought for this. And I wouldn't have known that that was possible had I would have not been around recovery. And so it hadn't always been pretty. Like, I don't want to make you guys believe that, oh, I found recovery and, once I finally gave into it, or, everything changed for the better. And there's some really good points too. Like, I don't want to belittle that, but life doesn't stop happening for us whenever we get clean. Like, as a matter of fact, life continues to happen, and we no longer have access to the substances that used to numb those life experiences. So when people die or relationships end or you lose a job, like, you have to feel that to the 100% full capacity that feeling can be felt. Like, there is no numbing it, because we know when we dip off into that, like, it's going to be all bad. So, for instance, I had gotten married at one point, and that marriage lasted all of like 10 months. It was very, very short-lived marriage. And I went through that and went through the divorce, and it was fucking brutal. It was not a fun time, but I didn't get loaded. One thing I did do, which is something that I'd been taught to do, was to reach out to others around me and talk to people. Actually share with other people how I'm feeling, that I trusted and I cared for and I believed in. And that did wonders, man. Another thing that I also did was, at the beginning, I told you guys about the people who go to detoxes and rehabs and share their story. I started doing that. And it's amazing, like, how my life problems tend to correct themselves whenever I'm doing my best to help somebody else out. So if I'm in a spot such as getting a divorce and not knowing what to do, my best bet is to try to find somebody else that I can help out, to get myself out of my own head, for one, and for two, to actually do something positive with my time besides sitting around and sulking. And so I started going to these detox and rehabs and talking to people and sharing recovery, man, and it got me through it. There did come a time later on, and I shared it on an earlier podcast, but just for reference, like, when you have been around recovery for a while, you hit this kind of wall, right? And so after a couple of bad relationships, like, I'd hit this wall, and I had become convinced that I was no longer getting it, right? Like, I was no longer able to work a solid program, and I was doomed to just live a miserable existence. And instead of seeking help from, like, a therapist or, maybe getting on some behavioral medications, I instead kind of reverted back to this spot in my head where I knew, okay, when I was a kid, I took these pills that made me feel euphoric and way better. And what I'm kind of like diagnosing myself, right? Like, I'm telling myself that, you need to get back on those pills. Talk to a doctor, tell them the truth. Like, you can't focus, and, you're having a hard time at work, and, you're also feeling this and feeling that, and get back on those pills. It's been enough time. You can handle that. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't go to a head doctor. I went to my primary care doc and kind of dope fiend him into prescribing me these pills. Looking back on it, I can see that's what it was, man. And ended up getting engaged, and I'm still on these pills. We got married, and on the honeymoon, I went apeshit. I had been taking under the required dosage of this medication leading up to it, so I had this big bottle of these pills of Adderall, and the temptation was there. Here I am in Mexico. I'm with my beautiful wife, and I'm still just like feeling depressed and like blah. And so I'm like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm going to have a good time. And I started eating these pills like Pac-Man, started drinking, got all kinds of fucked up, man. Came home and I got on one. I went back out for a while. So after 7.5 years of maintaining clean time, I went out for about 4 months until I finally had enough, and I went back into recovery. And I was fortunate enough to sit down with some people who were professionals and who could kind of like work through what had happened with me. And we put it on paper, and it wasn't hard for me to see that where I was falling short was I was convinced that the 12 steps of recovery were applicable to everything that was going on inside of my head. And while shades of that are true, I'm here to tell you right now, the 12 steps will not fix a mental health issue, full stop. If you're listening to this and you're in recovery, or you know somebody who is, and they are afraid to go to a psychiatrist or a therapist or get on meds for their behavior, please tell them about this story, because it could save their life, man. I wish to God I would have reached out to other people before I got loaded on this last relapse. Because afterwards, when I came back into recovery and I came back into the room, so many people came up to me and said, I know what you went through because I was there too. But instead of getting loaded, this is what I did. And every one of them were talking about how they went and saw mental health professionals. And man, it's just so vital, especially to people like us, because I'm convinced, guys, that as addicts, we tend to feel things a little bit more than your average Yogi Bear. Yeah, I'm not afraid to say I'm probably more sensitive than most people that I deal with. Now, I hide it, but I still tend to feel things a little bit more than I think that most people around me feel them. And as a result, we really need to have an avenue to discuss what that means and what that looks like. And kind of, because when I'm standing in a pile of shit, let me put it this way. When I'm standing in a pile of shit, it's very hard for me to have a real solid perspective on how big that pile is. It typically takes somebody outside and who isn't standing on this pile of shit to be able to say, hey, that's pretty big pile of shit here and there, Drew. Might want to do a couple of these things, and maybe we can get rid of some of that. And that's what, counseling and the like has done for me. Now, the 12 steps and the principles of recovery, that's my core, That's where I operate from. And I don't know that I can adequately tell you what that means, right? You have to go through the experience, and what that experience looks like is crawling in the doors of a 12-step meeting hall and just saying, I don't know what the fuck to do. And there's something that happens after that, so long as you listen, that is just an important part of this whole thing. It's so different and it's so incredible. And here's the deal, is that these places only exist because other people believe that their job is to continue to show up and be there for the next person who is struggling. That's it, man. There is no outside funding. There's no government checks for, having a 12-step meeting or chairing one or anything like that. It is 100% paid for by its own members. There's no dues or membership fees, nothing like that, man. Just a bunch of people who have been fucked up by the same thing, sitting around a table and trying to figure out how best to navigate the world around us. That's a beautiful thing. And so having that coupled with counseling and whatnot leads us to kind of where we are today. Recently, I celebrated 8 months clean on August 8th. And so I'm working my way back towards having a year clean, man. I can't tell you how hard it was, though. I was no stranger to relapse, guys. Like, I would show up to a meeting in my earlier years and they give you like these little medallions or key tags wherever you go. And, it's for 24 hours, I'd promise to stay clean and, be confident that I was going to work towards 30 days clean. And shit, I'd make it maybe 2 hours outside of the meeting and I'm getting high again. So I had a stack of these key tags and these medallions. And so I'd never accumulated a lot of clean time. But when I had finally done so, and I relapsed after 7.5 years, that was really tough. It was really tough to come back and look people in the eyes that I'd spent so much time around. Like, man, I was involved. I was, held different service positions within the rooms. I had helped out starting up meetings and taking meetings into jails and shit like this, detoxes, rehabs, all of that good stuff. And to walk back in and say, I fucked up. It was hard. It was hard, but it was a necessary thing for me to do. And I reached out, and I was never once made to feel less than. I have still never been made to feel less than. I was the only one with a foot on my neck, right? And man, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for a wife who, despite my best efforts, refused to give up on me. I was pretty bad. Got pretty bad out there, just disappeared, went off the face of the earth, and just ghosted her. You see, because when I had relapsed, I was ready to say fuck it. I knew what was about to happen, and I didn't care, or I did care, and I just thought it was unavoidable. And so that's something I'm not gonna soon forget. Having that awesome woman by my side who walked me through it, and having those wonderful people in recovery who walked me through it. And you know what? Even some of you Twitter folks who are there, my Liberty people, like, you guys saw some of the crazy shit. And when I came back around, like, you made me feel nothing but love, and I thank you for that. So that was that's kind of the rundown, guys. That's kind of where I started, how it turned into what it turned into, and where I'm at now. 8 months clean today, If you're struggling with drug use, if you're struggling feeling like you're never going to fit in, or you're never going to be comfortable in your own skin without getting loaded, please, man, just understand that there is a way out, and it doesn't have to end in prison. It doesn't have to end in a grave, and it doesn't have to end in you in a white jacket in a padded cell. Like, there is a way out. I promise you. And if you or a loved one is struggling in any way, shape, or form, man, reach out. I will do my best to get you hooked up with the 12-step meeting in your area. And having been around the community as long as I have, I would be shocked if I couldn't get you in touch with at least somebody that is specific to your area who could help you get hooked up, and somebody meets you at the meeting place. So yeah, that's it, guys. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And for those of you who are listening on Spotify or iTunes and have found this podcast, please follow me at clean_podcast on Twitter, or LibertyDrew84. That's my other Twitter handle. Come find me. And once I post this podcast, I'll post up a song by one of my favorite bands called Days and Days, and they have a song and it's called Self-Destructive Anthem. Might not be great for everybody's palate. It may not be something up your alley, but the lyrics nonetheless are 100% on board with that struggle and trying to describe what it is that leads us down the path that we do. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the show, end the episode. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. I think tomorrow I'm going to interview my buddy Taylor, and we're going to kind of talk about his story and talk about libertarian shit. And so, yeah, that's all I got. Thanks a lot, guys, and y'all have a great weekend.
All right, there you go. Thanks for tuning in. One day I will, redo my story, here on down the road. Hopefully update it with a little bit of a more inspirational ending than what it was at the time. But, like I said, I am participating in a little self-care this week. I had intended to take the week off, so I figured it's easy enough for me to download the story and re-upload it and let you guys hear it who haven't had the opportunity to do so yet. And, thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. Thanks a lot for the continued support for the show. Thank you to all the guests that continuously come on and enhance my own journey in this crazy thing we call life. And I'll just kick it to the song of the day with that, man. I'm fairly certain I've played this song before, but you know what? It's a good song. If you're so inclined, check it out. It's Benjamin Todd, and the song is called I Will Rise. And it's about his own struggles with addiction and, recovery. But it's a song of him talking to himself saying that, I'm going to rise above this. And, even with picking up, 2 years, I'm still going through that kind of like guilt and shame, and remorse and kicking myself in the teeth. And here's the fucked up part, man, is that I don't hold anybody else to that set of standards, just me. Right. So I'm getting there, and I will rise. I will rise beyond this. I'll rise above this. And, seeing other people grab a hold of recovery, it absolutely helps me out, and it enhances me. And so, man, thanks to all of you guys. I hope you have a kick-ass week. I love you from the bottom of my heart. I love you. I care about you, and I think the world of you. So with that, here is Benjamin Todd.
Oh, it's hard to wake from feeling blue. Oh, but I will rise. I will rise. And my hands may shake from lack of booze. Oh, but I will rise. I will rise. Though I've fallen out of space and time, oh, I will rise. I will rise. And I dug my grave with honest lies. Oh, I will rise. I will rise. Now I'm king of the hounds. I wear shame like a crown. And they're placing bets all over town on how I'll die. But I'll rise. And I grieve to death from losing you. Oh, but I will rise. I will rise. Now I choke on ash like cheap perfume. Oh, but I will rise. I will rise. Oh, I'm scared to death of my own mind. Oh, but I will rise. I will rise. And from the bottom of the well I hide. Oh, but I will rise. I will rise. Now I'm king of the hounds. I wear shame like a crown. And they're placing bets all over town on how I'll die. But I will rise. And I walk through hell and like the view. Oh, but I will rise. I will rise. And though your image of me now is skewed, oh, I will rise. I will rise. And I've given up my final time. Oh, and I will rise. I will rise. And now my candle burns from either side. Oh, and I will rise. I will rise. Now I'm king of the hounds. I wear shame like a crown. And they're placing bets all over town on how I'll die. Oh, but I will rise.